According to the latest source, the Canon EOS R5 Mark II will be released in February 2024, and it's going to get a big boost to its video capabilities. So stick around after this short break for all the details. But first, subscribe to this channel for a chance to win a Canon EOS R5. I'll be giving one away to one lucky subscriber once this channel reaches 100,000 subscribers. Anyone above the age of 18 with a valid mailing address is eligible. Additional terms and conditions are linked in the description down below. Canon Rumor says that the Canon EOS R5 Mark II will be able to do 8K video up to 60 frames per second. Okay, so 8K up to 60 frames per second RAW. The Mark I can do 30 frames per second RAW, so no big deal, right? Well, keep in mind that the latest leaked specifications, both from Canon Rumors and the Camera Insider, have speculated that this camera could shoot up to 60, 61, or even 62 megapixels. And to be able to do 8K RAW at 60 frames per second full sensor readout, that would be, well, it would be over 10K oversampled 8K, which is certainly possible. It's plausible, but it's certainly going to take an awful lot more effort. But according to the Camera Insider, this camera is supposed to have a new image processor, the Digic 2XS. Now, does that mean it's going to have two image processors and they're the XS? Sounds like Apple's naming terminology or naming convention, doesn't it? And it's certainly plausible. It could have two image processors, or it could just have a new image processor named the 2XS that's very powerful, that's going to be able to do 8K RAW at 60 frames per second with an oversampled rate. But Canon Rumors disagrees with that logic, stating that at 60 megapixels, there would need to be some kind of pixel binning for RAW shooting. So to a lot of people, a 45 megapixel sensor makes an awful lot more sense from a technical side. While we trust that the source says 60 megapixels is likely, we still think that 45 megapixels will win out in the end. It just makes more sense. And it's certainly plausible. For many months now, I've really wondered, is the Canon EOS R5 Mark II going to get 60 megapixels or 61 megapixels and then 62 megapixels? A lot of leaks or a lot of information coming out on this camera is speculating that. And maybe that's just because the Sony a7R5 has a 61 megapixel sensor and people are forecasting, predicting what they think is going to be in the EOS R5 Mark II and passing that on as a leaked specification. This does happen when it comes to rumors. People, instead of, well, getting the information from the source, are just making things up and passing it along as something they believe they know. But let's continue with the 4K specifications. According to Canon Rumors, the source also claims that 4K will get a massive frame rate bump. The Canon EOS R5 offers 120 frames per second in 4K. We all know that the Canon EOS R5 Mark I can do 4K up to 120 frames per second, and it looks pretty good. It's a little bit softer than 4K at 30 frames per second, which gets 8K oversample 4K. 120 frames per second in 4K. It does have a new Digic X image processor, and it's supposed to have a stacked sensor. Again, we're not sure right now whether it's going to be 45 megapixels or 62 or 61 or 60. The rumors are starting to disagree with themselves, but let's just go ahead and assume that it's going to have a stacked sensor, a new image processor, and that means we will get 4K up to 120 frames per second, providing more detail. It's also possible we will get full sensor readout in 120 frames per second, so that would mean 8K oversampled 4K. But what does a massive frame rate boost mean? Well, Canon Rumors thinks that a massive frame rate boost means we could see up to 240 frames per second. But knowing Canon, I would assume that this camera would be able to shoot up to 180 frames per second. So we could do 4K up to 120 frames per second, full sensor readout, so that's 8K oversample 4K at 120 frames per second. Be also able to do 150 frames per second and also 180 frames per second. Now, 240 frames per second is certainly plausible. We see this in, well, some rumored upcoming Canon cinema cameras. To do 240 frames per second it's not a huge technical feat. We've got video cameras, and I'm not talking about expensive cinema cameras, but we've got video cameras that can do up to 1080 frames per second, 960 frames per second. So doing 240 frames per second or 180 frames per second isn't a big deal. But can it do it with an awful lot of detail? And that's the thing. I don't want to be able to shoot soft video. There's no point in being able to go up to 180, 150, or even 240 frames per second, or even, now massive to me would be 480 frames per second. To be able to do that and not have the detail, well, that really matters. And when you're pushing an awful lot of details, think about it, 45 million pixels, not per second, you're doing 45 million pixels per frame. And if you do that at 240 frames per second, that's a significant amount of data that you're pushing, that you're having to capture, that you're having to process, that you're having to put on the bus and then capture on storage. And one thing I hope that the Canon EOS R5 Mark II will be able to do is have dual CF Express Type B card slots, so you can record to both card slots without having to change things up. And I do hope we get support for Gen 4 in CF Express Type B cards, because that will allow us to put up to 3.6 gigabytes per second in data, storing it on the card, so it doesn't matter what you're shooting, how many frames per second in stills, how many frames per second when you're shooting video at 8K, 60 frames per second, 4K, at 120, 150, 180, 240, or maybe even 480. Having the speed of this machine significantly boosted, and that's what we're seeing here with a stacked sensor. That's significant because it can push a whole lot more data a whole lot quicker. And then you're having a new image processor, so you can actually process a whole lot more data, having a faster bus to be able to handle that data, and then of course having faster storage. Now, as far as Canon goes, they're not going to put a limitation on whether it's Gen 3 or Gen 4. It's really up to the storage manufacturers like Angelbird putting out cards that can handle those speeds. They would have to be Gen 4, so it's up to the card. If a card comes out and it's Gen 4, the camera can certainly use it. The only question is, can they maximize that speed performance, because that's an awful lot of data. But in terms of the date, well, the Camera Insider had said that the Canon EOS R5 Mark II is likely going to be announced in the week before the lead up to CP+, which happens sometime in February 2024. Last year it was right around the 15th or the 20th. I think it was around the 22nd to the 24th. So we are probably about 4 months away from the actual announcement of the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, which also means we should start to get an awful lot more information. And Canon rumors stated that while most details are obviously still vague about the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, we are starting to see more mentions about the camera. So it feels likely the February 2024 announcement date is going to happen. So it's most likely that the February 2024 announcement date is going to happen. Well, folks, this is what I said going back to Black Friday last year when we got those massive, incredible leak specifications on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II. One thing I said then is if these are real, then we can expect to get more information coming out and validating this over the next coming weeks and days, and that didn't happen. We didn't have any more Canon EOS R5 leaks for about 6 months afterwards. And here we are in October now, the second week of October, and already we've seen an awful lot of leak specifications, supposed leak specifications from multiple sources. The Camera Insider, we're seeing it from not just the Camera Insider, but Canon rumors, and even we've gotten a few things talking about this camera, that it's being in the hands of testers. So it is coming soon. There's an awful lot of noise. There's an awful lot of information that's coming out around this camera. So I'm willing to believe that the announcement date is going to happen just before CP+ in February of 2024. So really exciting. The only question I wonder is, what's the resolution of this camera going to be? Is it going to be 45 megapixels? And I'd be perfectly happy with 45 megapixels. I wouldn't feel let down, although you know what, I would like it to be bumped up to 50 megapixels to at least give me 8.6K oversampled 8K, right? I mean, that to me makes an awful lot of sense. And I think Canon, looking at the Alpha 1, would at least try to match 50 megapixels. We don't know, we don't have any confirmation of what the exact resolution is, but I tend to think that 50 megapixels, and I said this way back last year when we were talking about resolution, I think that 50 megapixels makes sense, but 60 not so much. But all the latest rumors, even the ones coming from Canon rumors and also the Camera Insider, are speculating that it could go up to 62 megapixels. It's only this latest one by Canon rumors that is saying that 45 megapixels is most likely. We don't know at this point. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you want to stay up to date on the latest camera gear news and rumors, specifically on the Canon EOS R5 Mark II, well, then go ahead and subscribe and also choose all notifications. And for all those minor news and rumors out there, for all those news stories that aren't quite big enough to have their own separate video, then go ahead and follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter. And to help support this channel, which is very much appreciated, it's not going to cost you anything in any way whatsoever. Please, when purchasing stuff from Adorama, B&H, or Amazon.com, please use these affiliate links down below, because I get anywhere from $2 to 12% back. And today, well, at least early this morning when I checked, there's some huge discounts right now. Thanks to Amazon Prime, everybody's got discounts on. $1,000 off the Canon EOS R3, links below. $500 off the Canon EOS R5, the Canon EOS R5C, many camera lenses, and many other cameras in the in this sale right now. So you probably want to take advantage of those, unless of course you're waiting like me for the Canon EOS R5 Mark II or the Canon EOS R1. But that's it for now. Have yourself a great week, and we'll see you again soon.